Hello, I'm Cassie Clark, and this week I researched some dissertations that focused on religious freedoms and anti-Catholic movements in the United States, beginning in the early 17th century through the antebellum period. I went a little broader in my search definition than I usually do, but was able to find two unique academic works that, while focused on similar research, had different research focuses and approaches. My graduate thesis that I did focused on religion also, specifically Catholicism, and how it impacted the movement for independence by the Texans from Mexico. Immigration from the United States and Protestants that were moving into the region of Tejas y Coahuila, which was controlled by Mexico. These people were obligated to renounce any other citizenship, convert to the Roman Catholic faith, and become Mexican citizens. This was part of the impresario system pioneered by Moses and Stephen Austin. Religious requirements failed to be enforced in any significant way, since the bulk of the Catholic religious leadership left the Texas region when Spain lost the war. They followed the Spanish, they followed the money, and they went back to Spain. Also, primarily because of the Native American population in the region and what they felt was a lack of protection. They feared being alone in that part of Mexico. The Anglo-Americans that immigrated into Texas and eventually took control of the country and formed a new government. They created an entirely new religious landscape in the emerging New West. And some of the themes from my graduate thesis kind of shine through in the two dissertations that I found this week. So as to the dissertations research this week, the first one was titled Reviving a Spirit of Controversy, Roman Catholics and the Pursuit of Religious Freedoms in Early America by Nicholas J. Pellegrino for the University of Las Vegas in 2015. His research focused on equal rights for religious minorities suffering discrimination and prejudices in America viewed through a Catholic lens. He argues, quote, that religious freedoms were developed through a process of negotiations from the early 17th century and after the establishment of the United States and its governing documents, while they were also working to make American culture more tolerant of other religions, meaning outside of Protestantism. He further argues that by showing how Catholics were an unrecognized minority group in America, his dissertation fills the historical gap, but also shows how the narrative on American religious freedoms changes when one chooses to focus on alternate Catholic settlements outside of the established originals like Baltimore. And by putting those Catholics alongside other dissenters that were the Baptists, the Deists, and other reformers. His research methodology is situated on several points, then applied to several centuries of American history. His theoretical approaches and methods are comprised of comparative examinations of anti-Catholicism and Anglo-American culture, an inclusive review of historical religious freedoms as they existed in mid-18th century America, the American Revolution, making the American Republic, and the larger immigration periods in the Eastern United States. To further individualize his research in this area, he focuses his attention on specific individuals or organizations that were influential in the expression and acceptance of religious freedoms for Catholics and others considered dissenters through the previously mentioned periods in American history. His work also focuses on nativist sentiments that then tie the second dissertation into this week's research. The second dissertation is one by Luke Ritter, titled Anti-Catholic America, Nativism and Religious Freedom in the Antebellum West. His work looks at the nativist culture in America that was forming into larger religious and political organization and how those groups, along with the immigrating Catholics, settled into the New West, rather than focusing on the larger immigrant populations in the East. He begins his paper by looking at a speech given by Charles Boynton in 1847 in Cincinnati, a location that had seen a huge increase in Catholic immigrants. Boynton says, the Protestant Republic cannot dwell in peace with Rome. The immigration of Roman Catholics to the U.S. not only increased the power of religion at loggerheads with the Protestant Christian majority in America, but Boynton proclaimed it also brought a political crusade against American liberty carried on under the guidance of the crowned heads of Europe and waged principally through the ballot box and Jesuit schools. In other words, Boynton and his audience believed that Roman Catholicism threatened Protestantism and the American Republic. Ritter examines the Nativist Party's desire to also increase the residency requirement for naturalization from the 5-year requirement that it was at the time to 21 years. 20 years after Boynton's speech, the Nativist Party is going to organize into the Know Nothing or the National American Party. Here's where Ritter's dissertation comes together to, quote, meet the growing interdisciplinary need to position the early 19th century Nativist movement alongside developments in religion as well as in politics, and this to reassess the significance of nativism in American history. Ritter points out that religion and region were one in the same when examining the focus of this dissertation. The increase of immigration in the 1840s and 50s sent at least half of the immigrants to the trans-Mississippi West. Here, cities like Chicago, Cincinnati, Louisville, St. Louis, they grew rapidly and primarily because of these large immigrant populations and immigrant groups. Ritter's methodology and approach includes focus on the previously mentioned intended research points, applying lenses such as political history studies, ethnic studies, religious studies, legal studies when it came to church and state. His use of primary source documents such as period books, campaign paraphernalia, legal testimonies, newspapers, private correspondence, sermons, speeches, congressional records, just to name a handful, is impressively woven into the research narrative. He proves his position throughout and concludes that the Protestant American myth and nativists in the major cities in the New West consistently depicted Catholicism as contrary to American liberty and provoked Catholic American counterclaims to freedom. I'm considering focusing on immigration and religious freedoms in the United States for my dissertation. Unfortunately, I have not narrowed the focus down to a working research approach yet. I am trying and thinking and working on that. In addition to the dissertations this week, I looked back at a couple of my favorite historiographies, The Republic for Which It Stands by Richard White, which examines the U.S. during Reconstruction and the Gilded Age, and the epic work by Gordon S. Wood, Empire of Liberty. When researching nearly any aspect of early American history, these two books become very useful because they touch on religion, culture, politics, social issues, and they have always been really useful references in my experience. I look forward to working with everybody over the next 8 weeks or so in reading your papers, reading your blogs, watching your videos. Thank you for watching and responding. I look forward to any critique and criticism as well. Have a good one.